Hello, we've all been there. You decide you're going to build a new, really good habit, but just a week later, it's pretty much gone. Well, what if the secret isn't about adding something new to your life, but about replacing something old? Let's explore why that tiny little shift can make all the difference.
You start out feeling strong, really motivated to make a change, but then, pretty soon, you're right back where you started. And this isn't about a lack of willpower. You're most likely falling for a very, very common mental trap. So let's break that down.
So most of us, when we're trying to improve, we fall into what we're going to call the addition trap. And the idea is pretty simple. We just think we can add more good things on top of everything we're already doing.
On the surface, the plan seems perfect. But what's happening underneath is that our old automatic habits are still running in the background. And when you're tired or when you're stressed, those powerful, easy routines, well, they will almost always win out over the new, more difficult one you're trying to build. Okay, go ahead and grab your workbook and find the While You Watch section for Lesson 5.3. So, for this first question, just think about your own experience. What usually happens when you try to stack a brand new routine on top of an old one? What's the typical result for you? Go ahead and pause here and jot down your answer. All right, so if just adding new habits on top of old ones doesn't really work, what's the alternative? Well, this is where we get to a much smarter move: replacement. It's all about swapping behaviors instead of just stacking them.
So what do we mean by replacement? It's actually a pretty simple idea. You take a time slot or a trigger that already exists in your day, and you consciously swap the action you take in that moment. You're not trying to create new time, you're just repurposing the time you already have.
It really just breaks down into two simple steps. First, you identify the exact time or the cue when an old habit usually kicks in, like, say, the moment you get into bed. Then, second, you swap the action. So instead of doing that old habit, you intentionally do something different.
Let's look at a clear example. The old habit might be getting into bed and then scrolling on your phone for who knows how long. The replacement is this. You still get in bed, but maybe you set a 10-minute timer for scrolling. When that timer goes off, the phone gets plugged in across the room. See? It's the same trigger, the same time slot, but a completely different action.
Now back in your workbook, take a moment to define replacement, but in your own words. How would you explain it to a friend? You can pause here and write down your thoughts.
So why is this strategy so much more effective? Well, it taps into a fundamental rule of how your brain operates, especially when it's tired. It's all about understanding your brain's default settings.
Your brain is designed to be efficient. It creates these familiar pathways for all the common things we do, like brushing our teeth or getting to school. And when you're tired, stressed, or just feeling overloaded, your brain will naturally choose the easiest, most familiar path it knows. It does this to conserve energy.
And this brings us to probably the single most important rule to remember from this lesson. Old defaults will always win when you're stressed or tired. Now, what that means is that you shouldn't be designing systems for your best, most motivated self. You need to design a system that your most tired, worn-out self can still follow.
Back in your workbook, I want you to think about this. Why does replacing a habit save more mental energy than just adding a new one? Feel free to pause here and write down your answer.
Okay, for the next question, just think of one small, specific example of replacement you could actually use in your own life. Go ahead and jot that down in your workbook.
All right. Now that we understand the concept, let's move from theory into practice. In the Apply It section of your workbook, we're going to start identifying your own personal targets for replacement. The very first step here is just awareness. What are 3 habits or systems you have that aren't really helping you in the long run? This could be anything: procrastinating on homework, a messy backpack. Just be honest with yourself. This is just for you.
Take a moment now. You can pause here and write down those 3 habits.
Okay, now for each of those habits you just wrote down, you're going to design a replacement. And the key here, this is really important, is to keep it small and realistic. This isn't about being perfect. It's about making a tiny change you can actually stick with.
Here are a couple of examples to get you thinking. If the old habit is scrolling in bed, the replacement is a simple 10-minute timer. If the old habit is just tossing papers in your backpack, the replacement is a quick 3-minute sort at the end of the day. Notice how specific and small these are. Okay, now it's your turn. Pause here and design your own replacements for your 3 habits.
You should now have 3 potential replacement systems written down. The final step is to choose just one of them to focus on. See, trying to change everything all at once is just another version of that addition trap. We want to focus our energy on a single, manageable first step.
So, look at the 3 replacements you came up with. Which one of those feels the most realistic for you to start with right now? Go ahead and circle it, and then jot down a quick note about why you chose that one. You can pause here to make your choice.
So, let's do a quick recap of the main ideas. First, simply trying to add new habits often fails because our tired brain will always default to what's easy and familiar. Second, the solution to this is replacement, swapping a less helpful habit with a better one in that same time slot. And finally, the real key is to start small, so that your new action has a real chance to become the new default.
Now you can take a few minutes to finish up any parts of the Lesson 5.3 page that you haven't completed yet. When you're all done with that, you'll be ready for Lesson 5.4, where we will take these ideas and design one full system that actually fits into your real life.